Imagine getting married only to be pushed off a cliff 8 days later by your new wife. Jordan Graham met Cody Johnson eerily on Halloween 2011. The pair got engaged quite quickly in December 2012. Interestingly, they hired a professional songwriter for the wedding. Hearing the lyrics back now is incredibly disturbing. Everyone wants a safe place to fall, and you're mine. You helped me climb higher for a better view, and you're my safe place to fall. The pair married in June 2013. Guests noted that Jordan did seem a little off at the wedding. She seemed to be crying a bit too much when she was walking down the aisle. Close friends also claim that she sent them text messages the day after saying that she totally had a meltdown. 7 days later, Cody disappeared. His boss reported him missing when he didn't turn up for work. Police found it quite odd that his wife hadn't reported him missing. She explained that she just didn't know where he was, and the last she knew he'd gone out with friends. On July the 10th, she received an email about Cody. The email stated, "My name is Tony. There is no bother looking for Cody anymore. He is gone. I saw your post on Twitter and I thought I'd email you. He had come with some buddies and met up with me on Sunday night in Columbia Falls. He was saying he needed to be with his buddies for a bit and take them for a joyride. 3 of the guys came back saying that they had gone for a ride in the woods somewhere, and Cody got out of the car and went for a little hike, and they are positive he fell and he's dead, Jordan. I don't know who the guys were, but they took off, so call off the missing persons report. Cody is gone for sure. Tony." During the search the next day in a national park, Jordan seemed uninterested and very disengaged. Now, strangely, she stopped at a secluded bit of road and told police she just had a bad feeling about that area. Despite how dangerous the area was, she climbed over rocks and peered over the edge of the cliff. Miraculously, she'd found a body. Tragically, this was the body of Cody. Now, police were able to track that suspicious email from Tony to a computer at Jordan's parents' house. Finally, she admitted to pushing her husband off the cliff. She eventually accepted a plea deal for second-degree murder. She was given 30 years in prison.
Imagine working on reception at a hotel when a woman runs through the door, collapses on the floor, and starts screaming that her child's been abducted. But if these cases have taught me anything, it's that nothing is ever quite what it seems. It's the 2nd of September 2018 when Carice Stinson fell into this hotel in Largo, Florida. She was wailing that her son, little 2-year-old Jordan Bilavow, had been kidnapped. Obviously, the receptionist immediately rang police and they raced over there to see what the hell was going on. Now, Therese was really out of breath and just started telling them the absolutely harrowing story. She was like, "I was walking to my friend's house, it was 9:30 p.m. I was really tired and this guy pulled over his car and offered us a lift." She was like, "I had my 2-year-old son in my arms. I'm very clearly quite heavily pregnant. So I thought he was doing a good deed." But she was like, "We got into the car and this guy starts beating me over and over. And the next thing I know, I wake up in a park and my son is nowhere to be seen and neither is the car." By this point, it was the middle of the night, so she ran to a hotel. So armed police decided to immediately start scouring the area. An Amber Alert went out. It was all hands on deck to try and get this little boy back. Sniffer dogs were out in force. There were dive teams searching every local body of water. It was really intense. Meanwhile, police grilled Therese about the identity of the driver. They needed to get a good idea of what this guy looked like. She was like, "Oh, he said that his name was Antoine and he had gold teeth. That's kind of all I remember." And investigators were like, "Right, it's going to be even better if we can get an actual look of this guy. Let's look at the CCTV. But when they found the CCTV of the park, nothing was adding up. She had been at that park, but she'd certainly not been abandoned there by a guy in a car. She was playing on the park on her own. It looked like she was killing time, to be honest. And her son was nowhere to be found in the images. What was even more harrowing is that this little boy's backpack with all of his belongings was found dumped nearby. It was starting to dawn on everybody that maybe this mother was not telling the whole truth. They searched her home and found blood. Now, she tried explaining this away and being like, "Oh yeah, kids have accidents, don't they? He fell and he cut his chin and that's the blood." But then even more disturbing details started coming out. Just months earlier, baby Jordan had been taken off his parents and placed in foster care because of DV from both the mum and the dad. Now, poor Jordan got placed with a loving family, a caring foster home, and then he was taken from that foster home and given back to his parents under supervision. The social services were like, "Yeah, we were monitoring the family." Well, the monitoring was clearly inadequate. Now this boy was dead. That's right, 2 days after the drama in the hotel unfolded, this tiny little boy's body was found. He was battered and bruised and discarded in the local woodlands. And surprise, surprise, the mum then decided to change her story. She admitted the so-called kidnapping and a man with gold teeth was all a bunch of lies. Now, whether you believe the next part or not is up to you. Let me know in the comments if you do buy this story. She told police Jordan fell out of bed of his own accord and hurt his leg, and was then crying in pain. And rather than console him, rather than look after your child that's just hurt themselves, she was angry that he was crying and hit him in the face. She said as she hit him in the face, he hit his head on the wall and then got some sort of concussion and started having seizures. And instead of getting him urgent medical help for the seizures, she decided to wait until he died and then dump his body. Now, if this is true, that's already horrific. Like, what kind of sick, evil person sees their child injured, sees them crying because they're hurt, and decides, that's made me angry, I'm gonna hit you? That's already horrific enough, but often with these confessions, I've just seen people downplay their role in murders. So it could be even worse than that. His cause of death was blunt force trauma, and he also had a broken leg. Now, could that broken leg have technically been from falling out of bed? I did personally break my arm falling out of bed at a similar age, so yes, it could have happened. I don't want to try and think about the other options here. Regardless, she was given 50 years in prison. And when she gave birth, remember, she's pregnant at this point while all of this is going on, her child was given to a deserving family.
This father was going to meet his child for the first time after establishing paternity rights, and he was so excited. He came well prepared, and when he showed up, not only was the mother and child not there, but the mother's husband was there with a bulletproof vest and took his life. This is Eddie Figueroa. He is an Army veteran, and at the time he was going to school for computer science. He had an ex-fiance who he shared a child with, and he had to fight in court in order to obtain custody time, and he was granted visitation after it was established that he was the father. His ex-fiance, the mother, had gotten with this man, Nicholas Mims. They were living together, and for some reason, the courts granted him as the supervisor for this visitation. Eddie was beyond excited to meet his child. He showed up with everything you could think of: diapers, wipes, snacks, a stuffed animal. He was so excited. But when Eddie showed up, Nicholas was standing on the porch with a bulletproof vest on, and Eddie was told that the mother and child weren't there for their scheduled visitation time. He was supposed to have 2 hours of supervised visitation with his child, so where was the mother and child? When Eddie was told his child wasn't there, he turned away to leave, but Nick called him back to talk, and within 2 minutes, Eddie lost his life. He was shot multiple times, including to his back. Nick here called the cops and said it was self-defense, that Eddie was threatening him, Eddie who was unarmed. Now, this happened back in 2022, and Nick had his trial earlier this year, but he was just now sentenced last week. There were over 200 exhibits of evidence, including surveillance footage, and it was shown that this was not a self-defense situation at all. A jury found Nick guilty for taking Eddie's life. A man who literally just wanted to know his child. And by the way, he does have possibility of parole one day, which is just insane to me. He sat there waiting for Eddie, prepared with a bulletproof vest and a weapon in his hand. And while this is some justice, I have a lot of questions on why the mother wouldn't be there. It is terrifying to know that Eddie did literally everything right. He proved that he was the father. He went to court. He fought for his child because he wanted a relationship with them. And he lost his life before he ever even got to meet him. I just personally wonder, in my opinion, if there is more that needs to be looked at here. My heart goes out to his family. He was so loved. His family has said the most beautiful things about him, and he should be here with his child.
This is one of the wildest things I've heard in a long time. I think you're going to want to stay for this one. In Florida, 3 teenage girls made a fake Instagram profile of a fictional teenage girl so that they could check one of their ex-boyfriend's posts. Now listen, I was in high school once, many moons ago now, but normal behavior. The profile that they make explicitly states that this is a high school student, and they even post some identifiable photos of a teenage girl, when all of a sudden they start to receive flirtatious messages from someone at school. If you've ever seen my face before, you probably know where this is going. You might be thinking, was it someone in their class? Was it a teammate? Was it an ex-boyfriend? It was the police officer stationed at their school. That cop message, that fake teenage girl's account several times and ended up asking her to hang out. And those 3 teenage girls understandably got uncomfortable and blocked him. Now, the next day, those 3 girls are meant to be meeting with their dean to discuss what happened. When that cop finds out about the meeting, and before it can take place, he pulls all 3 girls out of their classes, takes their phones, and deletes any evidence that he had messaged the fake account to begin with. These 3 teenage girls are looking at a man in uniform with a weapon meant to be protecting them, and he tells them to lie to the dean about it and never tell anyone what happened. Reason 3000 why cops shouldn't be in schools.
A woman has been missing for almost a year now, and her family is begging for answers. Where are you, Amy Owens? Amy Owens is a 47-year-old from Goshen, Ohio. She has 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter, as well as 5 grandchildren. Amy was very, very close with her family, and no matter what was going on in her life, she always managed to stay in contact with them, no matter what was going on. And she had a very loving heart, but because of this, would sometimes end up with men who didn't treat her right. In early 2024, she was living in Fayetteville, Ohio, with a man named Nathan, whom she would eventually get a restraining order against. After this restraining order, she was living in different places between Cincinnati and Goshen. But on July 23rd, 2024, is the last time her family actually saw her in person. She was staying at her mother's house, and after this date, it's a bit unclear where she went. Amy had no car, no money, and in January 2025, she was no longer on her mother's phone plan, so communication got patchy. But what we do know is she was living with a man named Jeff. We do not know Jeff's last name, but what we do know is Jeff was not treating her right. She would talk to friends over Facebook Messenger, and she would tell them that she hated it there and that he was treating her like crap. But she also told them she feared getting anybody involved for the sake of their well-being. So again, going off of Amy's loving heart, Amy did not want to tell her family or friends what was going on because she was scared and she didn't want them to suffer because of that. Her family asked where she was, but they didn't get much of an answer. Eventually, on March 15th, 2025, she told them Kentucky. But where in Kentucky is kind of unclear. It wouldn't be until after her disappearance when police got a warrant for her phone history and they would get a number for a man named Jeff. And this man named Jeff's area code was for Pikeville, Kentucky. Now, we don't 100% know if she was there or not, but this seems like the strongest lead the family has at this point. She was trying to get a car so she could leave, but Jeff was the one that was going to buy her the car, and he changed his mind. Her family was begging to talk to her over the phone or FaceTiming with her. They were offering to show her the grandkids, but she just said her speaker was broken. Amy was no longer acting like Amy anymore, and it was getting so hard to get a hold of her. Why was it getting so hard to get a hold of her? Was somebody speaking for her? Was somebody taking her phone from her? Or was somebody no longer letting her talk to her family? March 30th, 2025, at about noon, is the last communication the family got from her. She was texting her daughter, and Amy told her that she was going through a lot, that she loved her. She told her again that she was in Kentucky with Jeff, and then her final message read, "Thank you, I love you too." Her family continuously tried to get a hold of her, but never received anything back. Amy's family continues to look for her. If you or anybody you know knows what happened to Amy, where Amy could be right now, if you saw her in 2025 or 2026, or if you know who this Jeff person is, please contact the Brown County Sheriff's Office. Amy, if you are watching this, your family loves you so much and they miss you so much. And if you need help, please reach out. And Jeff, if you are watching this, please let the family know what is going on and where Amy is or what happened to her. She has children and grandchildren who love her dearly and they need closure. Thank you for listening to Amy's story, and please share this video. Amy's family was a big help in coming up with the timeline of events for this video, as well as answering every question I had for them. So please share for them.
I had never heard of this case out of the UK, and I want to share it with you. This is Sarah Barris and her brother, Brandon McCon. And these two were not like normal brother and sister. They were extremely close. And when I say extremely close, I mean they had 6 children together. Yes, they were in a secret romantic relationship that bared 6 children. But this was a secret, and every time she would get pregnant, she just said, oh, the father doesn't want anything to do with the child, and I'm a single mom. Meanwhile, her brother Brandon is living down the street from her house and would just come over every single day and help take care of her children, which were also his children. But to everyone else, including the children, he was just being a doting uncle and helping out his sister. Sarah and Brandon's childhood was not an easy one, and this is where they started to bond and eventually profess their love for each other. Even though Sarah and Brandon maintained this relationship for years and had 6 children together, they did not want anyone to find out about it. However, in May of 2019, things were looking like their secret was going to get out because their 2 oldest sons started to have really bad behavioral issues, and I guess like the British version of CPS got involved, and they were demanding to know who the boy's father was. And there was no way Sarah was going to tell them that her brother was actually the boy's father. She also didn't want the kids to find out because she had never told them that their uncle was actually their father. They thought their father had died in war. So everything was coming unraveled, and Sarah decided to come up with a plan to make the whole situation go away in her eyes. And Brandon just went along with it. So in May 2019, they came up with a plan to unalive their 6 children. They decided they would do this by giving the children large doses of their ADHD medication. But this plan did not work, and the kids just got violently ill. So they started researching other ways to unalive their children. And that's when Brandon and Sarah walked into their oldest son's bedroom and began to strangle them. They then put garbage bags over their heads and left the boys in the room. They then asked their 3rd oldest son to come to the bathroom where they tried to drown him. However, the plan wasn't going as Sarah wanted, so she decided to grab the other children and run into the bedroom and barricade herself in there and make it seem like Brandon was trying to unalive them all. She then texted her friend and said, hey, Brandon's actually the dad to all of my children, and he's gone crazy and is trying to unalive us. Her friend calls police, and police obviously go straight to the house. When police get there, they ask Sarah and Brandon where their older sons are, and they try to say that they're at a neighbor's house. However, they were just in the next room, so police found them relatively quick. They were then arrested and charged with the unaliving of their sons and also the conspiracy to plan to unalive all their other children. They were sentenced to 35 years in prison, and all of their kids were horrified when they found out that Brandon was actually their father, and they have stated that they are so afraid to end up like their parents, monsters, and that they wish they could just stay in prison for 300 years. This case is just so crazy to me. Like, you made these decisions, you wanted to love your sibling and have children with them, and instead of taking accountability for your actions, you want to unalive those children you made with your brother. It's so bizarre.
Very few details are known about these cases, but their stories deserve to be told too. This is part 2 of this series. John Peter Fox was 36 years old, living in San Francisco, California at the time of his disappearance. He was last seen by a man named Kevin Karish at the Gates Hayes Motel where he was living at, and police have been unable to question Kevin about this last encounter, and I'm not 100% sure how we know that Kevin was the last person to see him since they haven't been able to question him. There's very few details available in this case, so we don't know the backstory or anything. But John would be 70 years old today, and if you have any information about John Fox or Kevin Karish, you for some reason can contact the Valley County Sheriff's Office in Idaho. I'm not sure if that's where John's family was just able to get the case open or what, but you can contact them at 208-382-5160. Lisa Ann Stowe was 29 years old, living in Center, Alabama, when she went to sleep on December 28th, 1999, and her husband says when he woke up, she was gone. Now, I don't know if this is a case of Lisa was escaping a bad home life or if the husband knows more than what he's saying. There's just very few details available in this case, so I don't know. But if you have any helpful information, you can contact the Cherokee County Sheriff's Department at 256-927-3999. 3365. Heaven Desiree McGee was 20 years old and would be 22 today. She went missing on January 17th, 2025, and there was a potential sighting, it's not 100% confirmed, on January 20th in Stockton, California. They do fear that she is a victim of trafficking. If you have any information about her disappearance, you can contact the Oakland Police Department at 510-238-3641, and there is a $10,000 reward for information that leads to heaven. On April 1st, 2020, 36-year-old Samantha Marlene Ryder's mother dropped her off at a house on the southwest side of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and she has not been seen since. If you have any information regarding her disappearance, you can contact the Oklahoma County Sheriff's Office at 405-713-1000. And finally, JoJo Boswell, a 19-year-old Indigenous woman, was released from the Steele County Jail for a misdemeanor on July 11th, 2005, and she was walking alongside Interstate 35 in Owatonna, Minnesota. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Between 2:30 and 3 p.m. when she ran into a white man. They started talking and then walked off together, and she disappeared forever. If you have any information regarding her disappearance, you can contact the Minneapolis Police Department at 612-673-5373. Thank you so much for listening to their stories. And seriously, if you have any information, no matter how big or small, you can contact those numbers that I listed with their stories. Even though there's very few details available on their cases and it's hard to really put a story or a timeline together, their stories deserve to be heard. So if you are enjoying the series, please comment below so I know and can continue doing it, as well as make sure you follow for more true crime.
This is the autopsy report of Celeste Rivas Hernandez. The order in which the injuries are described is for descriptive purposes only. It is not intended to imply the sequence of injuries. Skin defect, 3/4 of an inch. Entrance involving the right abdomen, 21 inches below the top of the head and 1 inch right of the midline, is a 3/4 inch length penetrating wound with smooth edges. The wound is oriented in the 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock direction. The wound track has an approximate depth of 1.5 inches. Direction front to back. Skin defect, 9/16 of an inch. Entrance involving the lateral left lower chest, 15 inches below the top of the head and 6 inches left of the midline, is a 9/16 inch penetrating wound with smooth edges. The wound track has a depth of at least 2 inches. Other findings: multiple skin defects are also present over the torso, with many perforating the skin and soft tissue without identifiable soft tissue hemorrhage or associated internal organ injuries. They range from 5/16 of an inch to 1/3 of an inch in the greatest dimension. Multiple superficial linear abrasions are also noted on the right dorsal hand. I believe that those are probably just defensive wounds. The upper and lower extremities show full thickness dismemberment with a relatively flat-cut surface through the soft tissue and bone. No discernible hemorrhage is identifiable at these sites. Multiple fragments of blue plastic material are found embedded in the cut surfaces. The right upper extremity is dismembered 9 inches from the top of the shoulder. The left upper extremity is dismembered 6 inches from the top of the shoulder. Fourth and fifth fingers are amputated. The right lower extremity is dismembered in 2 places. One site is 12 inches from the top of the leg and the other is 10 inches from the bottom of the heel. The lower extremity is dismembered in 2 places. The left lower extremity is dismembered in 2 places. One site is 9 inches from the top of the leg and the other is 15 inches from the bottom of the heel. Scene description. The location was on the 2nd story of the police garage impound lots. The victim was lying inside the front trunk of the Tesla. The Tesla was parked on the southeast quadrant of the lot facing east. The front trunk was open and yellow police tape surrounded the nearest vehicles, including the Tesla. From a distance, a black body bag was visible exposed inside the front trunk of the car. I did not observe any illicit drugs, drug paraphernalia, or alcohol on scene. No weapons were located during my scene examination.
She made it all the way home, but didn't make it inside because she was brutally murdered just steps away from her door. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Sally Ann Bowman. 18-year-old Sally Ann Bowman was a beautiful young girl who was an aspiring model. Her dream was to be on the cover of Vogue magazine. Her modeling career really began to take off when she became the face of Swatch watches, and she took part in their alternative fashion week in April of 2005. Following this, she was very quickly signed to Pulse Model Management, and Sally had the world at her feet. She was ambitious, she was driven, and she was determined to do well. On the 24th of September, Sally Ann, who had very recently turned 18, went for a night out with her sister and some of her friends. Instead of going out in central London, the girls decided to stay local, and so instead they went out in Croydon. At around about 1 a.m, she left Lloyd's bar and got a taxi to one of her friends' houses. Once she arrived here, Sally Ann reached out to her ex-boyfriend, a man named Lewis Sproston, and asked him if he would come and pick her up. He agreed, and so Sally went back into Croydon, where Lewis then picked her up. Sally Ann and Lewis had a very on-again, off-again relationship. They had a very normal teenage relationship, which included getting into arguments. Something that the couple would often bicker over is cheating claims. Sally would accuse Lewis of cheating, and Lewis would accuse her of doing it as well. At around about 2 a.m, Lewis picked Sally up and started driving her towards her home on Blenheim Crescent. During this drive they spoke, they sat in the car talking for a couple of hours, but ultimately this ended in another argument. Once again, over cheating claims. Sally Ann left Lewis's car at around about 4 a.m. He had parked up at the bottom of her drive, and Lewis watched Sally make her way into our garden before he drove off. A neighbour would later say that they heard screams at around about 4:20 a.m. It wasn't until around about 6 a.m. that someone who was outside would discover the body of Sally Ann Bowman dead on her doorstep. Sally Ann had been viciously stabbed a total of 7 times in her neck and her stomach. She had been forcefully bitten in her neck, chest and cheek, and she had also been sexually assaulted by her killer, him leaving his DNA behind. Sally Ann also had a number of items stolen from her. Maybe the killer took these as sort of trophies for the murder. This included some of her clothing, such as her underwear, the cardigan that she was wearing, and her phone. Initially, the main suspect for the murder was Lewis Sproston, Sally Ann's ex-boyfriend. Of course it was going to be him, because it's always the boyfriend. During a search of Lewis's phone, police were able to uncover text messages where the two had very clearly been arguing. He admitted to being the last person to see her, dropping her off the night before, but he denied that he had any involvement in what happened to her. Lewis was arrested and then held for 4 days until he was finally released after the DNA evidence ruled him out. Following this, there weren't really many leads or tips coming in. Police could uncover no more evidence, and so because of that, Sally Ann's murder began to go cold. That was until 9 months later, when police finally made an arrest on the 28th of June, when they arrested 35-year-old Mark Dixie. 2 weeks before this, Mark was arrested for a separate altercation. He had gotten into some sort of fight in a pub after watching the England versus Trinidad and Tobago football match. He seemingly wasn't happy about the score and had too much to drink. When he was arrested for this, police took a swab of his DNA. When that was uploaded into the system, it came back as a match to the DNA that was recovered from Sally Ann's body. Following this discovery and his arrest, Mark Dixie's home would be searched, where police were able to find pictures of Sally Ann Bowman and videos that Mark had took of himself pleasuring himself to the photos. His trial began in February 2008 at the Old Bailey, where Mark denied murdering Sally Ann, but admitted that he did sexually assault her when he had found her lay on the ground in a vulnerable and unconscious position. He stated that he had no idea that she was dying or already dead when he done this. The jury did not believe this story, and on the 22nd of February, Mark Dixie was found guilty of the murder of Sally Ann Bowman. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 34 years to serve. He will be able to apply for parole in 2040 when he is in his 70s. For many years, Mark would continue to deny his involvement in the murder. However, in 2015, he finally admitted what he had done, taking responsibility for murdering Sally Ann. Not only that, he admitted to other horrific assaults. In 1987, when he was only 16 years old, he forced a woman by knife point into her car, raped her, then attempted to lock her inside of the car and set it on fire. Thankfully, this woman was able to escape from the car. In 1998, while he was living in Australia, he held a Thai student at knife point and made her undress. After obeying these orders and removing her clothes, this student was stabbed, sexually assaulted, and then left for dead. Again, this woman thankfully survived, but I have no idea how Mark was able to continuously do things like these and then got away with it, to the point where he actually murdered an innocent young woman.
Groundbreaking news, one of the oldest and most infamous disappearances in American history, the Martin family of Oregon, has finally been solved. Here's the full story. Recently Solved Mysteries, episode 92. Viewer discretion is advised. The disappearance of the Martin family began on December 7th, 1958, when Kenneth and Barbara Martin left their home in Portland, Oregon with their 3 daughters, Barbie, Susan, and Virginia, for what was supposed to be a simple day trip. The family had planned to drive east into the Columbia River Gorge to gather greenery for Christmas decorations, a routine and innocent holiday activity. The Martins were last seen throughout the afternoon in multiple locations along the Columbia River. Around 4 p.m., they stopped at a gas station in Cascade Locks, Oregon, where they purchased gasoline and were reportedly continuing eastward. Later, they were seen at the Paradise Snack Bar in Hood River, Oregon, about 20 miles further along their route. Additional eyewitness reports suggested the family may have crossed to the Washington state side of the Columbia River later that evening, though these sightings were never fully verified. Despite these sightings, the exact route the Martins took and their later activities after DOS remained unclear. This lack of a clear timeline would later complicate the investigation significantly. Alarm was raised on December 9th when Kenneth failed to show up for work, and all 3 daughters were absent from school. The family was officially reported missing that evening. Investigators found their home undisturbed, dishes were left drying, laundry remained unfinished, and there were no signs of forced entry or struggle. Importantly, the family had not withdrawn money, suggesting that they had no intention of disappearing voluntarily. The Martins have effectively vanished without a trace, leaving behind a puzzling combination of normal domestic activity and sudden absence. The case quickly escalated into a full-scale missing persons investigation, marked by uncertainty and a growing sense that something had gone terribly wrong, formulating into one of the greatest and most infamous mass disappearances in American history. From the outset, the investigation faced major obstacles due to the lack of concrete evidence and the wide geographic area involved. Law enforcement agencies from multiple counties conducted extensive searches throughout the Columbia River Gorge and surrounding regions, but early efforts produced no definitive leads. Several unusual findings emerged during the early stages. A stolen white Chevrolet was discovered in Cascade Locks on the same day as the disappearance, along with a .38 handgun covered in dried blood. The weapon was later traced back to a theft involving the Martin's son, Donald, though it was never processed for forensic evidence, leaving its relevance unclear. 2 ex-convicts were arrested nearby for car theft, raising suspicions due to their proximity and timing. A witness even claimed to have seen them at the same restaurant as the Martins shortly before the family left. However, investigators were unable to establish a direct connection between these individuals and the disappearance. In the weeks and months that followed, authorities were inundated with tips, over 200 letters and numerous phone calls reporting possible sightings or clues. These included alleged sightings of the Martins in states as far away as Iowa and Montana, as well as reports of a vehicle matching theirs speeding along highways. None of these leads could be substantiated. A significant development occurred when tire tracks were discovered near the Dalles, leading off a cliff toward the Columbia River. Paint chips found at the scene matched the Martins' Ford station wagon. This evidence suggested that the family's car may have plunged into the river. In response, authorities launched an extensive search of the river. The Army Corps of Engineers even lowered the water behind the Bonneville Dam and conducted sonar scans. Despite these efforts, no vehicle was found at the time. The investigation took a tragic turn in May 1959 when the bodies of Susan and Virginia were discovered downstream in the Columbia River. Both were identified through dental records, and autopsies determined drowning as the cause of death. Although some initially suspected bullet wounds, no such injuries were confirmed. These discoveries intensified the mystery rather than solving it. The whereabouts of Kenneth, Barbara, and Barbie remained unknown, and the condition of the recovered bodies did not conclusively explain how the tragedy occurred. Over time, investigators developed competing theories. Some believe Kenneth may have accidentally driven the car off the cliff due to poor visibility or road conditions. Others suspected foul play, pointing to inconsistencies such as sightings placing the family on both sides of the river and the possibility that the vehicles may have been deliberately forced off the road. Despite decades of speculation and intermittent search efforts, the case remained unresolved for more than 60 years. The long-standing mystery of the Martin family began to reach a resolution in late 2024 when a diver named Archer Mayo discovered a submerged vehicle in the Columbia River near Cascade Locks. The car was located approximately 50 feet underwater, buried beneath layers of silt and debris. Recovery efforts in 2025 confirmed that the vehicle matched the Martin's 1954 Ford Country Spire. Key components of the car, including the chassis and engine, were retrieved and analyzed. Crucially, a camera case bearing Kenneth Martin's name and address was also recovered, providing a strong confirmation of the vehicle's identity. Further investigation led to the discovery of human remains inside the wreckage. On April 16, 2026, the Oregon State Medical Examiner's Office confirmed through DNA analysis that the remains belonged to Kenneth, Barbara, and their daughter Barbie. With this evidence, authorities concluded that there was no indication of foul play. The Hood River County, Oregon Sheriff's Office officially closed the case, determining that the family likely died as a result of their vehicle entering the Columbia River, whether by accident or another non-criminal cause. This conclusion, while providing long-awaited closure, does not fully eliminate the unsettling aspects of the case. The earlier suspicions of foul play, conflicting witness reports, and unexplained evidence continue to leave room for debate. However, the physical recovery of the vehicle and identification of the remains represent the most definitive answers available after decades of uncertainty. Ultimately, the Martin family case stands as both a tragedy and a testament to the persistence of investigators and independent researchers. What began as a routine family outing turned into one of Oregon's most enduring mysteries, one that, after 66 years, has finally reached a grounded and evidence-based conclusion, even if some questions linger in the darkest shadows.
You've just been told that your teenage son has died, but he's also killed 4 other people. How the hell do you process that information? Jordan McGinnis was an 18-year-old boy from the Gold Coast in Australia, and honestly, he had the perfect life. He was good looking, he was intelligent, he had loads of friends, had a loving family, he'd actually just started at the Griffith University and was super sporty and sociable. It was December 2012 that everything would change. Jordan and his mum, Melissa, headed out on a shopping trip together, and she tried on a cute black dress and asked Jordan what his opinion was. He said she looked really pretty, and neither of them had any idea she'd be wearing that very same dress to his funeral just a week later. On the 8th of December, Jordan went out with a bunch of his friends to a Christmas party in Brisbane. And that night he drove there, he parked his car, and he went in and he sat and he drank alcohol and he smoked M. Now, despite this being horrifically irresponsible, he then decided to drive himself home in the early hours of the morning. And it wasn't even like he was being careful. He actually drove way over the speed limit that night. And suddenly, terrifyingly, his car collided with a stationary vehicle. Now, I believe the car had been parked because it had broken down and it was a car full of people. This collision was horrific. The other car burst into flames like an absolute fireball. People inside were Natasha Maggs and Alan Sullivan, both 20, along with another couple, Cody Holland Williams, age 18, and his girlfriend Tiana. A 15-month-old baby was also inside of the vehicle, who was shockingly the only survivor. Both of the child's parents were killed in the horror blaze. The baby was taken to be looked after by extended family, thank God, but honestly, this just does not bear thinking about. And obviously, Jordan's family, when they were told that he had passed away, and then they were told that he'd also killed 4 other people because of his actions, they just had so many mixed emotions, understandably. They were like, how the hell do we arrange a funeral and talk about all of the good things about Jordan when he has just caused all of these people to die? I feel so sorry for Jordan's mum just having to deal with that conflict of emotions. It just must be absolutely horrifying. She actually said in interviews that she felt like she'd failed as a mum, which obviously definitely wasn't her fault at all. And his parents now advocate for more education around young people and reckless driving.
Not all men, I know that, but it's so hard to accept when thousands of them saw a teenage girl's murder photo and called the guy a hero. On the evening of July 13th, 2019, 17-year-old Bianca Devins and her friend Brandon were heading to a concert in New York City, and along with them was another guy named Alex, someone that Bianca has started having feelings for. But Brandon, he couldn't stand it. He hated Alex's guts with this growing intensity because in his warped mind, Bianca was his. He was so fascinated with her ego aesthetic and how edgy and untouchable she seemed that over time, that fascination had slowly twisted into something far more consuming. obsession. For months leading up to that night, he had been confessing to her just how deeply he felt, how often she occupied his thoughts, and how impossible it was for him to ignore his love for her. But Bianca just didn't see him that way, and she told him that over and over. But being rejected didn't stop him from fiending. If anything, it made everything worse. He started texting her constantly and supplying her with drugs just to exploit her vulnerability when her guard was lowered. But still, none of that ever worked. No matter what he did, Bianca always said no to a committed relationship. And that night, while everyone was having a good time lost in the booming concert music, Brandon looked over at Bianca and saw her, her lips pressed right up against his. She was kissing Alex. In that moment, something deep inside him just snapped completely. He couldn't stand the sight of her with someone else. Not after everything he just poured into wanting her. And for the rest of the concert, his mind was in a state of pure rage. Later that night, after the concert finally ended, the three of them got into Brandon's car for the long drive home, and Alex and Bianca were sitting awkwardly in the back seat. Bianca could probably feel that something was wrong with Brandon, and she probably knew exactly why, the kiss. So at some point, she quietly texted Alex, who's sitting right next to her, saying, "I think he saw me kiss you." Eventually, they dropped Alex off, leaving just the two of them alone in the car. And as the drive stretched into the early hours of the morning, Bianca, likely exhausted from the night, closed her eyes and tried to rest in the back seat. But sometime around 4 a.m., Brandon suddenly pulled off the highway and parked into a dark, isolated dead-end road. He took his phone and placed it carefully on the dashboard and started recording. He reached under his seat and pulled out a long knife that he had stashed there days before. And after that, he turned to the back seat and woke Bianca up. And in this cold, detached voice, he said, "I saw you kiss him." And Bianca, who was probably exhausted from the whole night and most likely fed up with all of his jealousy at this point, just apologized to him, saying, "Yeah, I'm sorry." Maybe she could sense how upset he was, that she thought apologizing was the best thing to do, but Brandon responded immediately, saying, "Well, sorry is not enough." And as the tension tightened further, Bianca tried reminding him that they were not exclusive. There was no betrayal here. She does not belong to him. And at some point, she asked him a simple, direct question. "Are you ready to take me home?" Thinking that would end all of this nonsense and get her out of there. But in that moment, Brandon realized that if she walked away, if this ended, he would lose her completely. And in his mind, that was something he could never, under any circumstances, accept. So in a fit of rage, he reached for the knife, and with this firm, white-knuckled grip, he lunged toward her and began to her in the neck repeatedly. Brandon, sitting there covered in blood, began screaming at her lifeless body, saying, "Why did you make me do this?" As if the responsibility could somehow be shifted onto her. But then Brandon does something that makes this case even more disturbing. He grabbed his phone from the dashboard, stopped recording, and began taking photos of her body. Graphic, deliberate images that he would later post online for the world to see, and thousands of men would come across. And many of those men would respond by calling him a hero, saying, "Wow, you really did the world a favor," claiming that she deserved this level of brutality simply for rejecting him. This world needs a serious reset button. After taking those photos, Brandon stepped out of the car and into the night, not to run, not to hide, but to continue what he had started. He built a bonfire beside the car, and while the flames flickered against the darkness, he pulled Bianca from the car and positioned her body to take more photos of her, posting each one of them with the caption, "Sorry fuckers, you're going to have to find someone else to orbit." Not too long after, Brandon called 911, his voice eerily calm and controlled as he said, "My name is Brandon, and the victim is Bianca Michelle Devins," before adding that he was going to hang up the call and end himself right along with her. An officer immediately geared up and rushed to the scene with lights blazing, and once he arrived, he could see Brandon standing still, holding the knife. The officer immediately drew his weapon and began shouting at him, telling him to put the knife down now. And that's when backup officers arrived, trying to push forward to stop Brandon from hurting himself. But at that exact moment, Brandon gripped the knife and slashed himself hard across the neck. As his own blood was pooling on the ground, he reached for his phone and started posing, taking pictures while he laid across Bianca's body, waiting to join her. Following his self-inflicted Brandon was immediately rushed to the hospital where he unfortunately, but fortunately, made a full recovery. And I say fortunately because death would have been way too easy of an out for him. In the end, he was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison with the possibility of parole. But is that really enough? He took the life of an innocent teenager. Whatever happened to an eye for an eye? That's all for today. Please be kind to each other and remember, no means no. Group hug.
Think you used to date the king or queen of manipulating liars? Listen to this story. November 2nd, 2016 was a normal day for the Papini family of four. Husband and father Keith Papini gave his wife and kids a kiss goodbye and headed out towards his job at Best Buy around 6:50 that morning. Keith's wife Sherry took their two kids, who were 2 and 4, to daycare, and then she came back to the house so she could go for a run. Later that evening, when Keith got home from work, he saw Sherry's car in the driveway, so he fully expected Sherry and the kids to greet him at the door like they did every evening. Unfortunately, he was met with silence. Sherry, who had been married to Keith since October 2009, was nowhere to be found. Keith starts to panic when he realizes that the kids were never picked up from daycare, which was totally unlike anything Sherry would ever do. Any hope of this being just a misunderstanding went out the window, though, when Keith found Sherry's phone and earbuds, which had blonde hair wrapped in it, near their mailbox, which was a mile from their home. Keith freaked out and decided it was time to call 911. Within hours of the call to 911, nearly 100 volunteers from the community had come together to search for Sherry. Shasta County Sheriff's Office spent hours and hours investigating the case, completed dozens of interviews, and followed up on nearly 800 tips. Despite how hard they tried, minutes turned into hours, hours turned into days, and days turned into weeks with no sign of Sherry. Very early on in the investigation, Keith agreed to take a lie detector test to prove his innocence so police could focus their efforts on other leads. 22 days had passed, and admittedly, police said they figured they were looking for Sherry's body as they no longer thought she was alive. But then, just over 3 weeks after she disappeared, a bombshell. At 4:30 in the morning on Thanksgiving Day, still wearing chains around her waist and restraints around her wrists and ankles, Sherry was released by the captors and found running down County Road 17, which was nearly 150 miles from where she was abducted. This poor woman had been tortured, nothing short of tortured. She was emaciated, covered in bruises, burns, and rashes. She had chains around her waist and clamps around her wrists and ankles. Her nose was broken, her long blonde hair had been chopped off, and shockingly, she had been branded on her right shoulder. Sherry says she had gone running that morning. As she was nearing the mailbox, 2 Hispanic women, one between 20 and 30 years of age and the other between 40 and 50 years of age, pulled a gun on Sherry and forced her into a dark-colored SUV. Sherry told police that the woman spoke Spanish the majority of the time, which prohibited her from understanding most of their conversation. Sherry told police that the older woman was ridiculously mean to her and that her breath smelled like sweetened coffee. Once in captivity, Sherry spent the majority of her time chained in a room. She said she specifically remembered smelling the laundry detergent on the pillowcase they used to cover her head. She says she never saw the faces of her captors because they either had masks on or Sherry's head was covered with a pillowcase. She could recall details, though. For example, the woman would often play mariachi music. The night before Sherry's release, her captors were arguing. They were arguing over Sherry's need for medical care. It got so heated that the younger woman shot the older one. Sherry didn't know if the gunshot killed the older woman, but the younger woman then let Sherry go, which is how she was ultimately rescued. Investigators.
What can a bunch of incarcerated men who murdered their wives tell us about the biggest lethality indicators in relationships? It turns out we're getting everything wrong. So researchers have been doing something that most people don't know about. They've been going into prisons and interviewing the men who killed their partners, asking them how it happened, what they did, and how they kept anyone from stopping it. So a 2025 study interviewed 68 men across 9 countries. There were 97 interviews. Every one of them had murdered his female partner. The researchers were looking for patterns. They were looking at what these men did in real time in the months and years before the killing, and 7 tactics showed up over and over. 1, they isolated her from her people, her friends and family. 2, they gaslit her about her own reality. 3, they restricted her ability to work. 4, they vilified her to anyone outside the relationship, her friends, her family, her therapist, his friends. 5, they built alliances with other men who would back his story. 6, they controlled her body, what she ate, how she dressed, whether she could leave the house. And 7, they controlled her access to healthcare. So think about that list. How many of those involved any physical acts or them hitting her? 0. These are the documented tactics that men used in the months and years before they murdered their partners. And every single one of them is nonviolent. Every single one of them, from the outside, sounds like a bad relationship and not a deadly one. A different researcher, David Adams, did his own set of prison interviews, men in the US who killed their wives, and he asked them what kind of men they thought they were. The most common type that emerged is what he called possessively jealous. Not impulsive, not mentally ill, not they just snapped, possessive. These men believed she was theirs, in their own words. So the killers told us what to look for. The patterns are documented. The early warnings are there. And in the next video, I'll show you the filter that catches every single one of these tactics at the sentence level in real time before the murder is the first incident. So follow me for more.